All right, I apologize for the delay in getting started there. It seems they didn't like my American laptop. So throughout the day, you're going to get this presentation here. You'll see maybe some fonts that aren't happy with the way we work, but that's all right. We'll power through it. So thanks for attending today. We're going to talk a bit about lean requirements and something dear to my heart, Batman, and how the two are very tightly intertwined. This will work, I swear. Okay, there we go. All right. So who am I? My name is Bill Cronin. I'm the PMO Director at Devbridge Group, and I help oversee all the process and practice there. We are an organization that helps build custom software for Fortune 1000 companies. We're purely agile. We are very much fundamentally lean as an organization, and we introduce these concepts to companies that are often not comfortable with our approach and way of working. And we're very successful in doing that. And as part of that process, we travel around the world helping to educate and implement and build software from the ground up in a very lean fashion. We have offices here in Lithuania as well over in the United States, and again, I do apologize for what's going to happen in the next 4 years. But I want to get a bit into the state of how software exists today, and the reality is pretty grim. 1 out of 3 software projects will fail. That's a well-known statistic. Of the ones that don't fail, half of those will be over budget or delayed. That equates to, within just the Fortune 500 companies, $200 billion in waste. Effort that you are investing in coding, testing, designing, and launching products that no one uses or that never see the day of light. Worldwide, it's estimated it's $1 trillion in waste. A lot of it comes down to a lack of process and understanding. 1 out of 4 apps are never even installed in the App Store. Half of the products out there, companies don't even measure ROI or user engagement. It makes you feel that some people just want to watch the world burn. You know, they don't get it. And so you start to see these patterns over and over again. And I start to see some Batman patterns in them as well. 1975, Batman comic books came out. It's also the same year that Kodak invented digital camera technology. But they didn't use it. They were fearful that digital cameras would destroy their margins in the marketplace because they sold and made money off of film. So as you can imagine, by 2012, Kodak filed for bankruptcy because they didn't embrace an experimentation mindset, didn't leverage innovation, and didn't realize the world around them was changing. Blockbusters, once the thriving Friday night thing to do in America, was go down to Blockbusters, rent the latest bad flick that came out, and grab a pizza, go home, and that was your Friday night. Right? It's also the same year Batman Forever came out, and that is also a pretty awful flick. But what the founders, and as the organization grew, they realized that actually it wasn't about buying physical movies, or DVDs, VHS, all this, or reaping the rewards of people who forgot to rewind VHSs, or delayed, fees. What they realized was actually it's about streaming. So they partnered with this great company called Enron and tried to do streaming back in 2000. We all know how that worked out. They even had the opportunity after that failed venture to buy Netflix. But they said, you know what? We're convinced this is the future. A lot of this came down to a lack of that experimentation mindset and a lack of a willingness to embrace change, look at the world around them, adapt to a new way of operating. In 2008, they filed for bankruptcy. Who still has a MySpace account? Did you know in 2005, same year Batman Begins came out, 2005, MySpace was the #1 social media in the world, right? It didn't take long before Facebook took over. MySpace went into consolidation, was later bought out in an attempt to try to relaunch it, and now Justin Timberlake owns it for a mere fraction of what it was. Now, it's still a decent platform for musicians, but again, it was an organization that forgot to look around them. How many of us owned a BlackBerry at one point in time? I know I did. I actually didn't mind it. But I would realize that there were better products out there. They were changing, becoming more advanced, recognizing that the foundations around them were fundamentally altering. 2009, BlackBerry had 40% smartphone market share. Roughly the same time that The Dark Knight came out. So I feel like there's a common theme going on here that helps. Batman really just takes care of a lot of the problems. He is destroying companies that aren't innovative enough to keep up in the marketplace. And as a developer, sometimes it can be frustrating for videos to play. It's a video of a guy smashing his computer with a sledgehammer, which is oftentimes how I feel whenever I've built a product that no one uses, or how I feel now when the video won't play. Software products fail for 3 main reasons. That's it, right? The majority of all the projects out there that you'll be a part of that will eventually never see the day of light fail for 3 simple reasons. Number 1 is a lack of executive support. I wouldn't mind having that as my executive support. Executives don't believe in this new fandangled thing called agile. They don't like to embrace risk. They want to see commitments, dates, 8, 10, 15 months out. In this new world, there's a lot of uncertainty. Software changes very rapidly. Being able to adopt and accept that risk and ambiguity is a key component of the success these organizations didn't have. And that comes from the top. No end user involvement. So lonely up there. You know, our end users are what the organization thrives on. Without them, we wouldn't have jobs, and those organizations wouldn't succeed. But oftentimes, products are built in silos. They continue to forget it's the end user's input that drives what the market needs. Now, I'm not talking about innovation, right? I still firmly believe innovation is created by producers. The people in this room help thrive and build and generate innovation. But validating your assumptions, your users are critical to that. Creating solutions that no one sees and making assumptions that you aren't validating is how you build organizations that fail. My favorite topic is unclear requirements. Man, oh man. There's this traditional concept that requirements in documentation form are the most effective way to capture your requirements. Lengthy, bulky Word documents, 100-page, 200-page, no one reads them. How difficult are those to maintain? And then if I handed that to you to say, start coding right now, where do you even start? How do you break that down? What's the priority? The biggest issue I have is oftentimes Business analysts, product owners, teams of people are locked away in a closet and told to pave the path of the future for this organization. 6 months later, they come back with a documentation that only they understand. And then it's over the fence, figure it out. What do you do with all this documentation? Again, poor video. Oh, there it goes. Hey, all right, there you go. You now know what to do with that documentation. Because it's a different way of operating now. We're in a different world. That world needs a smarter way of building products, and it starts at the beginning. Understanding why you're building it, who you're building it for, and what problems you're going to solve. And hopefully we get some nice sound here. See it? I can use Windows Movie Maker. So what do? We have to start by assembling cross-functional teams. No more people siloed into different areas. You get executives in the room. You get junior business analysts in the room who are going to write the requirements. You get developers, designers, testers, everyone that is going to touch the foundation of the creation of this product who is invested. Right? That includes getting your executive sponsor involved, making them accountable for the success of what you create. So what do these people look like in real life? What does that process look like in real life? This is us doing a workshop where we pull everyone into a room. Designers, developers, testers, clients, and we start brainstorming. We started brainstorming what outcomes we wanted. How do we measure those outcomes? What are the challenges we're trying to solve? Who are the users, the pains, all the things that we could potentially start doing? It overflows in this room. The goal of this activity is to achieve shared understanding. You get everyone in the room, so, all right, let's build this. Build what? You start to visualize, you collaborate, you share. Oh. Okay. Let's discuss, debate, iterate. What if? How do we do this? How do we share effectively different methods of collaboration without it breaking out into anarchy? And from that, we're able to get to a level of shared understanding that we can take away and execute on with confidence. And then 3 months, we come back and do it again. Reevaluate what we've learned. Just like Batman has his gadgets, so too do lean requirement superheroes have their gadgets. Right? Post-it notes, thick markers. The concept is you got a tiny space and a big marker, so you're not going to be able to write much on there. There's something about that tactile experience. It's like you're being back in kindergarten again, right? You're like playing with Legos. That just brings everything down a notch, makes things simpler. So you get these people in a room and you start to discuss what is the problem you're trying to solve. Are you pursuing client satisfaction, revenue, maybe some other first-to-market approach? But you discuss and you agree and you figure out what your priorities are. You get that shared understanding, which includes metrics and outcomes you can measure that validate that you have done the right thing. What does success look like, and how do you know you've achieved it? You need to define measurable outcomes that you can capture. If you don't have the ability now, you build that ability. Because if it's that important, it's well worth the investment to make sure that you finish and know when you've done. And then we start to work on defining who the users are. Who are these personas? Very simple terms, right? Got my butler, got my commissioner, got my tech support. These people have different needs, wants, challenges, problems, pains. The goal of personas is a very simple conversation to generate empathy for the user. It's very important that you feel in that session some pain emotionally for the user's problems. Because otherwise, why are we all here? So we get them in the room and we start to brainstorm. Okay, we went through the problems. We understand the outcomes. We've got measures of success that we know that we can chase. Okay, and these are the users. I feel the pain. I'm ready to do it. Let's start to solutionize. Let's start to build a product out. So we give them Post-it notes, we give them these markers, and they start to generate ideas. And it's kind of chaotic, right? Then we affinity map these together. We consolidate, identify groups of items, things like alerts, dashboards, push notifications. From that, then, you're able to group those into larger epics. Then you get a nice little picture on the board, a bunch of Post-it notes. It's called visualizing. The second part is actually the hardest part, and that's where the fun comes in. Prioritizing, defining your minimum viable product. How do you release to market with the maximum value and minimal investment? How do you validate what you've done with the least risk? People have done this entirely on paper. Take a product, put it in front of people, get some feedback on paper. That's a good MVP. So now we start iterating through ideas, prioritizing, flagging and tagging, debating. We come up with different versions and approaches, scenarios and goals. What do I want to be able to do in V1? What do I want to be able to do in V2? Well, you know what? I really want to have a Batmobile. So, okay, that's what we're going to focus on. And then you start to work with the teams collectively in the room to estimate who is doing the work. Those people do the estimates. We use story points. You're welcome to use whatever. And that's the way that we're able to figure out roughly how big things are. It's all about relative size. And from this, we can get a release plan. I've got my Batmobile over there, and I've got a few other things lined up. I'm good to go. This is a confident plan to start. But this is just a starting point. This will iterate. This will change as we start building and learning about the Batmobile. Actually, you know what? We can try something different. Right, maybe in the Bat Cycle, we actually put the Bat Cycle inside the Batmobile, and then you can just detach, drive off. I mean, that's pretty cool. When that came out, I saw that. I was like, that's awesome. Because they built the Batmobile first, then figured out that's what they had to do. And this is a video showing us actually people participating in it. Well, initially they don't. They're very hesitant. But eventually they, okay, I see it. All right, I get it. Yeah, all right. So we're posting ideas on the board. Okay, I get the idea. All right, and then we force people to get up. Come on, let's get up. Let's stand around this. Let's talk. Let's debate. Engage. And it's this beautiful picture when you got senior directors standing next to junior business analysts. Geez, they're timid initially, but then eventually the expertise comes out. The free flow of knowledge comes forward. And that's the real power of this, that collaboration over documentation that Agile Manifesto talked about. This is it in action. The goal of all of this activity is to achieve shared understanding. Without this, you are destined to fail. If you feel that you don't have this inside your organization, you can start this process at any time. You don't have to do it at the beginning. Do it in the middle. Do it at the end. Do it as part of your retrospectives. Evaluate where you are with your level of shared understanding. So once we create our story map and we've got a nice, healthy plan, we start to engage our designers, right? We start to look at not just the front-end user experience, what the wireframes, information architecture, flow looks like, but we start to stitch that together, make it cohesive. We start to look at what those mock-ups, options for branding and theming look like. And then we start to cut code. We have a pretty solid idea. Now, we don't have it all worked out. We might have a couple thousand screens at the end of the day when the product's said and done. But we start when we have about 10, because you have enough to get started. You have enough runway to move. So let's see this in action. We work with a company called CIBC. It's the fourth largest Canadian bank. They have a branch of offices down in the Caribbean. And they have a lot of users down in the Caribbean who have mobile banking and they check their balance by text message. I imagine it looks something like this. And we realized that very simple functionality, very minimum viable product would increase perception of the product, perception of the company, value of the company, number of accounts that would grow. People actually would start loving this company. It's a really weird concept. We brought all the stakeholders in the room, went through a lot of the same exercises, created a story map, had our designers, while they're in the room, start sketching. Yeah, that's a good idea. All right, what about this? There's sketchbooks there open, on the fly, thinking. Ideas are generating constantly. From that, we start to get these architectures, simple step navigations of what the user experience would look like. Then you can start thinking what the information architecture looks like. What's the goal I'm going to be able to do on each of these steps? What are my activities? Then you can break that down into what do the experiences within each of those screens look like, and how do I achieve that goal? How do I make sure that I can easily transfer funds, or I can easily make a payment or find an ATM? We look at branding and styling, apply that branding and styling to mock-ups. Right? We get something in the hands of actual users so they can see what it looks like. Executives walking around the room in their other executives' office space and showing off actual prototypes that we had built. We stitched this together in Envision app. There's some other ones out there, Flinto and so on. But you see, you get very real idea of what the final product looks like. This whole thing will take about 2 or 3 weeks. Minimal investment, absolute minimal investment. But you're able to then take that out to users and validate assumptions. Sit down and have one-on-one conversations. Do user interviews. Ask users, just go through the prototype. What do you think? Give us feedback. What are your thoughts? User research. Deploy it out there. Let people access it on their own. Implement tracking. See what type of traffic you get on it. That doesn't hook up to anything, right? There's no back end yet, but you're validating those assumptions. Usage metrics, when you can start looking at actually hooking up live back-end infrastructure to it. What traffic do you need to consider? What load do you need to manage? What infrastructure do you need to support this? You're validating all sorts of assumptions, again, by building minimal investment, creating throwaway code, but you know that code is going to be able to tell you something valuable. The result in this case is we launched 2 products to the App Store in 4 months. Right? Everyone loved it, except for that little guy. We're still working on that little guy over there. But everyone loved it because it enabled them to do something that they weren't able to do. And now we iterate. Right? You couldn't do fingerprint login. Right? You couldn't do wire transfers. You couldn't upload a check. Couldn't deposit things remotely. It was a little clunky, but you know what? 4 months, that's something out there fast. Then you iterate. You start to release in increments. The Batmobile did not happen in one day. 50 years of beautiful engineering there. That's the problem. People don't understand how simple it is to build software. It's 8 steps. And as developers, you should be heavily involved in each one of those. There's not just one person doing any of these activities. Focus on getting executive support. Involve your end users. Make it a mandatory experience. Use lean requirements. I encourage you to take these concepts away and start experimenting. Keep an experimentation mindset. You'd be surprised what even just implementing half of those 8 steps would do to your organization. Thank you for your time. So Q&A, are half of these about why my fonts are awful? Okay. How important is a team to be in the same physical location? Would conference calls work just as well? I love that question. Who asked that question? All right. So we're Lithuanian based, right? We all do all of our engineering based in Vilnius and Kaunas. But our clients are all North American based, right? We work with companies like John Deere, Aon, Ernst & Young, big companies. So no, not every day. They're not all in the same location. But when we do our workshop, we fly our people over. Because whatever the investment is, $20,000, $30,000, we spend a week on site. That minor investment has massive returns on the outside of it. Because everyone leaves the room with shared understanding. We get alignment that's very rare to achieve remotely. Now, when we return back and we actually start cutting code, we're doing a lot of video conferencing. We use GoToMeeting or WebEx, whatever it is, but we embrace video conferencing because there's this aspect of seeing the whites of somebody's eyes that changes your communication style. You're actually thinking when you commit to something. That sits in your brain, different than if you're accepting an action on a conference call. You see the emotion and pain people are going through when they're frustrated. I don't have any APIs, or my environments are blocked, or this is slow. Why is this so slow? Very different level of exchange. So highly recommend for the initial and maybe subsequent follow-up sessions that you have, maybe every quarter you're doing face-to-face. The investment will pay you significant dividends. How do you deal with disputed projects? For example, working with multiple clients having different agendas. Man, you guys are hitting all the good ones. All right, so multiple clients, hidden agendas, or different agendas. Multiple vendors working alongside you who also have their own agendas to get more work. What I love about this process is it forces all of that to the forefront. I mean, everyone's hidden agenda becomes very open because you have shared alignment. You have to get alignment or you don't really start. Yeah, sometimes it can take us 4 hours, sometimes it can take us 4 weeks. But the goal is to ensure that everyone's on the same page. You have to force those difficult conversations to come to the forefront. And those will be challenging. We have the same issues ourselves. So I don't have an answer about how you make the world easier, but I will tell you by forcing those conversations forward, you remove risk in your execution. You don't have these kind of minefields of problems that you're going to run into because you didn't make that a conversation up front. 2017 Batman. Oh, man. Ben Affleck, huh? All right. The new dawn is due to hit the screens. Shall we start to worry? I was actually just thinking about including a slide about that the other day. Yeah, there are companies out there, definitely. You can see there's always larger organizations that kind of tumble and fall. They struggle to maintain their position because I think they struggle to attract top talent. Organizations that retain and attract top talent tend to stay at their peak. And I'm hoping that some of the organizations today that are faltering recognize it's about the people in the room that make that organization successful. Nice ideas, and they work. But such meeting actually requires a lot of mental effort. Oh man, and coding doesn't? And people know they'll be paid the same, so why should they do it? Man. So we do agile transformations with executives, and you have to have a motivation. It sounds like these people aren't motivated, right? You have to want to change. Particularly in financial services, too big to fail. Where's the concern of failing, You create incentives, you create awareness, you create a sense of ownership and authority. Suddenly, when you are tasked individually with delivery, and it's not committee of decision, people step up. People who typically may have never even done that, they step up and say, start working now. All right, now let's do this. Right? I've got my name on the line. So there is a level of delegated authority that is required to create that motivation. You want to read the book Drive? Great concept of empowering people by giving them authority and autonomy and purpose, creating that sense. You'd be surprised what people can do. So as far as paying them more money to attend these workshops, I wish that would be nice. But the reality is you have to create a sense of purpose and motivation to where people want to be in that workshop because they don't want to see their work go to waste. They want to be successful. How does optimizing for short cycles? Kodak focusing on short-term film profits. Yes, deliver long-term innovation, digital photography. So the sacrifice of long-term success over short-term gains. It's a challenge, definitely is. I don't have an answer for that one. I think it's up to the organization when you have that initial conversation to recognize what the priority is for the company. Is it client satisfaction or is it short-term profit? Man, you're going to build two very different products based off of that. But you force that conversation to happen up front, suddenly you get a different response. People are intrigued. Why are we focusing on short-term profits? Oh, my bonus depends on it. Yeah, but our reputation, our brand also depends on that. Client satisfaction maybe is a balance. So it is definitely a conversation that comes out of that process. It forces you not to ignore it. We've got Brexit, Trump, and then peasants. Would you not worry? I think when there is adversity, it gives you a lot of new ideas on how to innovate and change. People will run for president who have never even considered running for president. People will change their views and opinions, and innovation will generate out of these changes that have occurred. So I think it's actually healthy because it challenges the status quo. It makes people who maybe didn't feel heard. But it also then puts the responsibility on those around you to step up and start to innovate and iterate and improve and challenge. Call is important, but not mandatory. Conference calls with video do a lot of magic, and on-site trips really add success as well. I would say, yeah, you need to go on-site. It's simple as that. I don't think we've ever done a successful engagement where we haven't seen the whites of the eyes of the people we were working with, the end users that we were building product for. It's a huge component. If you have a failing MVP, recover or shut down? Persevere or pivot? I love that question. Man, it's tough. It's tough. You have to go back to square one, validate whether or not there's a problem. Maybe people aren't downloading your app because there isn't actually a problem. Or you don't understand that problem. Or you've built a bad product. One of the three. But yes, I think you have to reevaluate. Make sure that you understand the current status of your product. Evaluate metrics, do user testing. See how people are actually using the product, what frustrations they have, why they don't like it. And then pivot. And if not, persevere, commit, stick to it. Book Drive you mentioned. By whom? Googling this is hard. I should have this off the top of my tongue, but I fortunately do not. Sorry, thank you, Daniel Pink. Phenomenal book about motivating people who are not motivated. You'd be surprised, actually, a lot of it is the opposite of financial incentives. Financial incentives created the problems that we were talking about earlier. People aren't interested in the short-term incentives. It creates the wrong behaviors. They're actually more interested in motivation, autonomy, authority, purpose. Great book. And there's a link. I appreciate you guys taking the time to hang out with me today. I'll be around for the rest of the day if you want to come up and chat. Thank you very much.